Hamas denies involvement in Rafah clashes, reaffirming commitment to the ceasefire, as Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu proposes naming the Gaza conflict the War of Redemption. Meanwhile, far-right ministers demand escalated strikes and Israel launches large-scale military drills near Lebanon. Tensions flare further as Israeli forces open fire towards southern Lebanese towns. A fragile calm faces growing threats.
And then, of course, we have the host tonight, and I just want to thank you very much. It was a reason we chose Egypt, because you were very helpful, and very, very helpful. Everybody wanted to have this, but we really thought it was appropriate, and you are a great leader. And he's a fantastic man and a fantastic general, by the way. But he's a great president, and I want to thank Egypt and all of your representatives for treating us all so well. Thank you very much.
Hamas has said it was unaware of any fighting in Rafah and affirmed its adherence to the ceasefire with Israel. The group noted that Rafah has a red zone under Israeli control, and contact with its forces there has been cut off since the conflict resumed in March. The Israeli occupation forces confirmed airstrikes in Rafah, accusing Hamas of targeting its soldiers. Medical sources at Al-Aqsa Hospital have reported that Israeli forces killed 5 Palestinians and wounded several others in an attack at Al-Zuwaida in central Gaza. Earlier, 2 Palestinians were killed in a separate Israeli airstrike in northern Gaza. The violence continues to escalate amidst ongoing hostilities in the region. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has proposed officially naming the Gaza conflict the War of Redemption during a cabinet meeting, citing a symbolic continuation of Israel's historic struggles. Netanyahu framed the war as part of a national revival and a direct extension of the War of Independence. He also announced plans to award medals of valor to Israeli soldiers, which will bear the new campaign time and name. The announcement came just hours before clashes reignited in southern Gaza, despite a fragile US-brokered ceasefire. Israel's far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has called on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to fully resume attacks on Gaza with maximum force. Posting on X, Ben-Gvir urged the Israeli army to intensify combat operations in the Gaza Strip. His remarks come as Israeli media reported several air raids across Gaza earlier. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich also echoed the hardline stance, posting a single word, war. Ben-Gvir's call reflects tensions within Netanyahu's broad but fragile right-wing coalition. Tom Fletcher, the UN humanitarian chief, has chaired the stark account of Gaza after crossing into Gaza City. He described the scale of destruction and the quiet resilience of the people amidst overwhelming loss. Fletcher urged the international community for not a trickle, but an avalanche of aid, emphasizing the urgent need to break the cycle of suffering and violence. The United Nations has issued a warning about the increasing threat posed by the unexploded ordnance in the Gaza Strip. Luke Irving, head of the UN Mine Action Service, said the clearance of these deadly munitions will be a lengthy and challenging process. Gaza Civil Defense spokesman Mahmoud Basel said that around 70,000 tons of unexploded ordnance remain in the territory, presenting a serious danger to civilians. He added that searching for bodies buried under rubble is slow and hindered by a lack of necessary equipment. And for further analysis, we're joined from Cairo by Al-Ahram Weekly Managing Editor Khalid Dawood. Welcome, sir, to Qnews, and it's a pleasure to have you today with us in our special coverage. Sir, what strategic objectives might Israel be pursuing with renewed airstrikes in southern and central Gaza?
Well, I think, Rana, the key message from the Israeli behavior, even before today, is that the war, from their point of view, is not over, or from their standpoint, is not over, and that's their vision for the future of the Gaza Strip, whereby, the Israelis will always give themselves what the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calls the right to have security control over the Gaza Strip and to interfere militarily at any time they fear or they allege that they are facing any sort of threat. And of course, in a worst-case scenario, if the truce stands or the ceasefire stands, and in the future, there would be like a repetition of the Lebanese scenario, whereby even after reaching a ceasefire agreement, we can see continued attacks, especially under the claim that the Hamas movement is not disarming as the agreement has stipulated. So probably, we're going to be into this for a while, at least until the visit tomorrow by the U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner, as well as the expected visit on Tuesday by the U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, at least to set some clarity about the future of the implementation of this agreement, both in terms of restraining Israel from continuing its violations of the agreement, whether under the allegation that the bodies of the deceased Israeli prisoners have not been released, or under the claim that Hamas is carrying out attacks within Gaza. There's definitely a need for the immediate intervention by the U.S. side to bring Israel to respect the agreement, to allow the humanitarian goods to enter through the Rafah border, and indeed to stop bombing and killing Palestinians while the truce is supposed to be in effect.
Could these strikes, sir, indicate a broader shift in Israel's military strategy, especially in response to alleged ceasefire violations?
Well, I don't think so. I think it's still early to speak about a change in the overall military strategy because until now, the Israelis and Hamas as well continue to insist that they are abiding by the agreement. But the problem, to be honest, Rana, is that the American side is always biased in its interpretation of the agreement to the Israeli side, justifying its actions. And of course, at the same time, we have a big problem with the understanding the policy and the attitudes of the U.S. President Donald Trump, because at one day he's saying that Hamas is correctly trying to crack down on gangs that used to steal humanitarian aid, and then the second day he threatens that if Hamas did not stop attacks against civilians, the United States will get in there and do the job itself, or through Israel, of course. So unfortunately, the inconsistency among the U.S. positions and traditional historic bias to the Israeli version of the story is the most worrisome part about this. And that's why, we definitely need the role of Egypt, the role of Qatar, the role of Turkey to convince the U.S. side that any measures have to be reciprocal, and that this agreement is not about satisfying the Israeli side only, but also meeting the legitimate demands and needs of the Palestinian people.
Did it meet the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people, sir, from your own narrative? How do you read it? Do you see it's going to work? Do you see that till today Israel is striking and bombing and killing and humanitarian aid which is entering Gaza is not yet enough for the people of Gaza? How do you read this ceasefire, sir, from your own perspective?
Well, to be very honest, Fana, this government of Israel that has committed all sorts of horrible crimes and crimes against humanity, against the Palestinian people, and the structure of the Israeli government itself, made up of, mainly fanatic and extremists, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The theory is that he's always falling under the pressure of the extremist elements, but he's an extremist himself in terms of rejecting Palestinian rights, rejecting the establishment of a Palestinian state, and that's why, all the ambitions and the hopes are that the U.S. President Donald Trump is the only one who's able to restrain and contain the Israeli Prime Minister, as we have seen repeatedly, whether during the war against Iran, the 12-day war against Iran in June, or recently when he forced him to apologize to the Qataris after the irresponsible, reckless bombing of the capital, Doha, to try to assassinate the Hamas leaders. So we can see for ourselves that the U.S. president has a very strong leverage against the Israelis, and that's unfortunately the only way so far to pressure the Israeli Prime Minister to at least, lessen his extremist ideology and policy. And we also, of course, have to wait for the developments inside Israel itself, when are elections going to be held, what's the future of this government. But from my own point of view, any hopes that this government and Prime Minister, who is charged with war crimes, will definitely seek to violate this agreement and satisfy his own right-wing base by claiming that he continues to maintain security control over Gaza.
With at least 47 violations since early October, what mechanisms are in place, if any, to monitor and enforce the ceasefire, sir?
Well, there is one important monitoring mechanism, which is at least to start with 200 American soldiers who were deployed to a base within Israel to start monitoring the violations of the ceasefire agreement and the implementation, not just the violation, but also the implementation of the different stages of the agreement. Because again, Rana, what gives Israel kind of an excuse to carry on this attacks inside Gaza is that it did not pull out its troops from Gaza. They continue to occupy Gaza. So that's why, we need the Americans to put pressure on the Israeli side to respect that agreement, to carry out further withdrawals from the Gaza Strip, and to carry out all the items mentioned in this 20-point plan by President Trump, including the pledge that this agreement is going to pave the way for the recognition of Palestinian self-determination and possibly the Palestinian statehood, and resuming negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians on a permanent solution. That's the only way we can see development in the Middle East, and that we can truly call it a historic agreement. Otherwise, it's going to be a truce followed by a war, followed by a truce, and the party that's always going to pay a heavy price is the Palestinian side, unfortunately.
Sir, what are the immediate humanitarian consequences of continued Israeli airstrikes, especially in densely populated areas like central and northern Gaza?
Well, again, as we have seen since the truce went into effect, Israel continues to bomb Palestinian civilians. A couple of days ago, we saw a horrible incident in which they bombed a small bus carrying a whole Palestinian family that vanished, including at least 7 children. And there are always justifications that Israel give itself to kill Palestinians, and also the issue of the deceased Israeli prisoners held by Hamas is always used as a kind of an excuse to prevent the entry of humanitarian aid inside Gaza. And that's why Israel is obliged, at least if they are serious about ending this file about the deceased prisoners, to allow the Turkish team that's waiting in Egypt to get into Gaza and to help Palestinians excavate the bodies of those Israeli citizens who've been there for almost 2 years. It's a very difficult task. And also to commit and not to make the entry of aid conditional on any other issues, because starving a population is a war crime. It has nothing to do with military or security needs. These are people who have basic rights, and Israel has been violating those rights, and that's why it's been accused of committing war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Sir, how might repeated breaches of the ceasefire affect diplomatic efforts or mediation by international actors, considering, sir, just giving you an example, there's in the plan, there's a yellow zone, there's a blue zone, there's a whatever zone The Palestinians and Gazans do not know anything about these zones. All they think of is to go and run to their houses. On their way, sir, when they're going and crossing, they're killed. 11 of a member of 11 were killed before yesterday because of this. Is there no one, sir, in this entire situation, a flag or a personnel or a policeman to say that this is a zone that you're not supposed to be crossing through in your country?
Well, the Israelis, Rana, have announced yesterday, the Israeli defense minister has announced that they are going to mark the so-called yellow line, which exists right now. But to be very honest, that's on one side, yes, it might be one way to prevent the killing of Palestinians in case they cross those lines. But at the same time, my main fear is that those lines are going to turn permanent, and that Israel will always claim that Hamas did not fulfill its side of the agreement, so we're not going to withdraw to the blue line or even further from the so-called buffer zones along the border of Gaza with Egypt and with Israel. So, I mean, on one hand, it's a positive kind of thing that there are some signs to tell Palestinians where to go and where not to go, but that should not go through the Israeli occupation army, because the Israeli occupation army is never going to be kind of a neutral side. It's a party involved in war crimes. So this should be left to their so-called international stabilization force that's supposed to be formed according to this agreement. And that's why I think we're seeing some movement by Arab and European nations to go to the Security Council and speed up the formation of this international stabilization force, because that would be one more effective way than depending on the Israelis to demark which parts of Gaza are safe and which parts are not safe. And let's not forget again and again that Israel has to pull out fully from Gaza Strip, and that's what the agreement stipulates, and that's what would lead to a permanent kind of agreement and a step towards the establishment of a Palestinian state.
So do you see, sir, that repeated breaches of the ceasefire affect diplomatic efforts or mediation by international actors?
Of course, it affects the development, but the problem, to be very honest with you, is that any violation committed by Hamas is always exaggerated, always condemned by the Americans, condemned by other parties that are totally biased to the Israeli side. While if any Israelis commit themselves, as we can see daily, those kinds of violations, the American government is usually hush, and they never kind of criticize Israel openly, and maybe perhaps they prefer to keep those criticisms behind closed doors. But as far as we can see, at least if we trust the public American statements, they do want this agreement to hold. And after the personal involvement of President Trump attending Sharm el-Sheikh summit, it's going to be pretty embarrassing for the leader of the world's strongest country that he cannot enforce an agreement that he was the one who mediated and sponsored with a key ally such as Israel.
Mr. Khaled Dawood, Al-Ahram Weekly Managing Editor from Cairo. Of course, I can't thank you enough for your valuable, informative knowledges and valuable analysis and informative intellectual knowledge. Thank you very much for being with us in this very special segment, sir. And now we move on to the developments in Lebanon.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين. وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
The Israeli Occupation Army announced the launch of large-scale military exercises that will last for 5 days along the northern border with Lebanon and in nearby settlements. In a statement, the army explained that the pre-planned maneuvers will begin on Sunday evening and continue until the following Thursday. They include simulations of various scenarios, including defending border areas and responding to immediate threats. Lebanese media reported that indirect negotiations between Lebanon and Israel are expected to take place in the coming period, focusing on several points that both sides are required to address. According to the reports, the proposed talks include a 2-month ceasefire, during which discussions would begin on an Israeli withdrawal, a final end to hostilities, and the demarcation of a land border between Lebanon and Israel. The negotiations will also address Israel's withdrawal from occupied points, the release of Lebanese prisoners held in Israeli jails, and an agreement to establish a weapons-free zone once the Lebanese army completes its plan to fully disarm Hezbollah south of the Litani River. Lebanese media reported that the Israeli occupation forces opened fire towards the towns of Sheba, Kafr Shuba, and Blida in southern Lebanon. They also noted that Israeli drones dropped sound bombs over the towns of Blida, Marwahin, and Khiyam in southern Lebanon. And for further analysis, we're joined from Beirut by political researcher Abdullah Naim. Welcome to Qnews, sir. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Sir, what message is Israel sending by conducting military exercises near the Lebanese border at this specific time?
Good evening, everyone. Of course, this here these are some games. The Israeli military have been doing this, but now they are trying to target Hezbollah. It is these are some war games and exercises. They have even planes, and they will keep on for a few days. And I think that the message here, especially after the message that the USA sent, I think this has to do with negotiations, direct negotiations between Lebanon and Israel. And the Lebanese president said that we can have negotiations with Israel, but indirectly under the negotiations that we had before. And I think that after everything that's happening with Gaza in southern Lebanon, I think that they will be more eager to have negotiations with Israel, either directly or indirectly. And so if we want to negotiate with Israel with some problems and weakness in the government, then Israel will take the measures they think are appropriate. We saw what happened in various regions in Lebanon, and we saw what happened in the regional waters. And so before this, Netanyahu sent a message to Lebanon before starting the exercises in Al Zahran, which is near the palace. And this message was from Netanyahu saying that we are here, we haven't left, and they still want to
got your
negotiate
point,
about.
Sir. What are the key points likely to be addressed in the indirect talks, and what are the prospects for meaningful progress?
Israel is saying that through the negotiations, that they will have indirect negotiations. They will have on a military level. They will have delegations from Israel and Lebanon, military delegations, to discuss how to move forward. And so, according to this, there are some points here between us and Israel that are common. The 5 points on the Lebanese border. There are disputes on how large they are, and over the area. And we have the Shaba and the 5 points that Israel have occupied, and also talking about border demarcation. Now Israel is saying that they are ready for. A ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon when disarming Hezbollah, but Israel wants a arms-free zone on the borders, and Lebanon actually said that we will not give up our sovereignty. And then they also said that if there are negotiations with Israel, then Israel needs to withdraw from the 5 points before we even start the negotiations. And so this was over week, and then Israel struck maybe more than 30 times. And I think that now after the whole situation on Gaza, this shows that there is a war in the whole Middle East. I think that especially after President Ahmed al-Shara visited Russia, and we know that he wouldn't have visited if it was not supported by America. There is a new plan in the region and enhancement in the region, and it is very clear that maybe we will have agreement between Israel and Syria through Russia. And so I think that Trump and Putin agreed to this, and I think that the summit that was held in Sharm el-Sheikh is the start or the foundation towards peace, especially that President Trump has met with the UN and Arab leaders, and they have agreed on a plan for Gaza. And
how do these developments affect the already fragile stability along the Israel-Lebanon border, especially given Hezbollah's presence?
Of course, we always have tensions. It was supposed to be settled, but Israel almost daily they strike Lebanon, and so there is so much tension. Some people cannot go back to their homes, and we are nearing winter now, and they are not living in their homes, and everything has to do with the disarming Hezbollah, and Hezbollah has to resolve this with the Lebanese government, because if things stay this way, President Trump and Israel were very clear: if Hezbollah does not disarm, then they will not have any negotiations. And they also talked about Israel having a war in Lebanon if the Lebanese government cannot decide for itself. And so I think that from now up until 15th of November, they need to reach some kind of outcome and to have we need to resolve this with the Lebanese government. We don't have much time. By the end of the year, we need this to be settled, because if it does not end, Israel will start a war in Lebanon by the start of next year. And so Lebanon is a country, and they need to also take...
Okay, sir, let's wait and see what happens on the 15th. Could external actors pressure either side to de-escalate military actions to preserve space for diplomacy?
We are talking about a diplomatic resolution, the negotiations that America has proposed this week and sent a message to Lebanon, and then Lebanon responded. This is diplomacy, and I don't think that the diplomatic path is not closed between Lebanon and America and Israel. But the matter of Hezbollah disarmament, they are handing in their arms to the Lebanese government, but they are some kind of stalling. I think that they need to do this faster, because Lebanon is running on borrowed time. Lebanon needs to take advantage of these diplomatic negotiations. And President Youssef said yesterday, said that he said that he is responsible for Lebanon, and so he will spare Lebanon the war, and he will take care of everything. And so this means that the negotiation path is not closed, and it shows that maybe there is some kind of agreement that is in progress already, and maybe it will not. But they will not have direct negotiations. Maybe they will be indirect. But yeah, we will have some kind of negotiations to prevent war
and
on
hopefully,
Lebanon.
sir, the negotiations that, of course, President Joseph Aoun is getting into and is very optimistic about comes true and is on the ground, and Lebanon is going to be peaceful. From Beirut, that was Abdullah Naama, political researcher. Thank you very much for joining us in Q News and for your valuable knowledge and time. That brings us to the end of our special coverage for this hour. For more stories and live updates, follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Q News EG. From all of us here, from all the team, thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more news and analysis on Q News. I'm Rana Khassas. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.